Good evening and welcome to this blind tasting that we're going to be doing this evening. Quickly, I'll just run you through the format of how it works. So those of you who have received the packs, you have four bottles with a number on them and also the ABV on the back. The number is the order that we'll be tasting them in. So we'll be starting with number 1 and finishing with number 4. So the reason for doing it this way was something a bit different. We thought we'd test my dad's knowledge of Kilchoman whiskies. Bearing in mind he's been there since the beginning, so we thought this was a good way of testing his palate. So he's in exactly the same position as you guys as far as tasting them along with you. If you've got any questions, do fire them in. Also this evening, what we'll be doing is the first person to get the correct dram. So if you guess number correctly, comment, and then we'll get a prize out to you in the post. I would recommend, if possible, having 4 glasses. This will just mean that it's easier to taste the drams, and also some water to add to some of them to pick out some more flavors. But yeah, so hopefully my dad will be there and we can add him to the stream and we can start the tasting. Evening. Yeah.
Good evening.
Very good to see you. So you've got your pack and you are ready to hopefully not make too much of a fool of yourself.
No, I mean, I think everyone thinks this is should be a stroll in the park for me, to be able to identify my own whiskey that I put together. It's not always as straightforward as that, but I think the colour gives away a little bit for me, which is handy, and I do also know the strength. So that's quite a nice starter for me, and then it's a question of nosing them and tasting them and see how I go.
Excellent. So have you poured number 1 yet, or are you?
Yeah, I've got number 1 and that's here in front of me, and it's a lovely dark rich color. So I would say that there's no doubt that this is predominantly a sherry influence. Maybe it could be something else like a red wine or the Madeira or port, but actually it doesn't have that sort of reddish color that I would associate with those particular releases that we've done, and this is, to me, is very typical of our sherry influenced releases that we've done. You know, there's a huge amount of influence of sherry on the nose. I know it's bottled at 46%, so that narrows it down. I believe. I mean, I'm saying that I think this is sherry influence, and from the nose, I would immediately get the real sort of rich sort of sherry bomb that I associate with one of our core expressions, which is Sele. I might be wrong, and I know I'm not going to be told until I've made my decision. But Loch Gorm, to me, which is also matured in sherry, probably doesn't have quite the same big hitting sherry influence. It's as I always describe it, a bit more balanced, and there's more of the distillery character coming through on the Loch Gorm, matured in sherry butts, than this one. I believe this has the influence that we've been looking for in Saneg in terms of sherry hogsheads with big hitting sherry influence, 70% of that, and 30% bourbon barrels, bottled at 46%. And yeah, no doubt, that's Saneg.
Final answer?
I believe. I mean, I'm not going to go for anything else. I believe that, to me, I mean, it's a great dram. It's beautiful at 46%. You don't need any water necessary. It's full. It's sweet. It's moorish. It doesn't have any alcohol burn. It doesn't have that sort of spirity character. It's still relatively young, I believe. This is 4, 5, and 6 years of age. We're adding older ages to the batting as we have the stock available. It's totally different from our other core expression. I think the hogsheads give it that wonderful, rich, soft character, and so I am saying this is Saneg.
Is there? So when you first got the dram, you mentioned that you go look at the color. for those people who aren't hugely knowledgeable on nosing and blind tasting whiskey, how do you then break it down to get to the position that you got to with Saneg? Is there, apart from you said the colour?
I think if I was tasting these completely blind and only on the nose, then it becomes a little bit trickier. The fact that you can see the colour, then that gives a lot away to you, and you know your individual whiskies pretty well. I mean, I put every single whiskey that we released together myself with Robin, production manager, and so you get to know. You hope you do, and you'll soon be able to test me once I get through these four. But the colour really demonstrates immediately what sort of cask it's been matured in. It becomes more difficult when it's not bourbon or sherry, and you've got other cask types which aren't so readily used, and that can cause an issue identifying it. But when you're looking at bourbon and sherry in particular, which is the mainstay of everyone's maturation, you have a pretty good idea when you look at the color. So once you've looked at the color, it gives you a good idea, and then the nose. On the nose with this particular one, you get a lot of sherry influence, but you still have that West Coast coastal character of the saltiness and the iodine coming through, though it's a bit masked from the sherry influence, which is sweet and spicy, but it's still there. And then when you taste it on the palate, I know that all our whiskies tend to have this sweet floral character. So that comes through to me as well. And at 46%, it's a wonderful dram. And bourbon influence is totally different. And certainly on the color, you can tell that, the middle two probably, I would suggest, are mainly bourbon influence. And we'll get to those later. But I think that is Saneg. Well, I don't. I'm absolutely sure, and I'll be absolutely dumbfounded if it's not Saneg. But I might be proven wrong. But I believe I've explained why I think it's Saneg. Loch Gorm, to me, as a 100% sherry influence and matured in sherry butts, just has a better balance to it, and not too much overpowering sherry influence. And these are hogsheads, I believe, that we're tasting here, which have much more sherry influence at an earlier age, and therefore that's what we were looking for. We wanted that to give it a big hitting sherry influence at a relatively young age.
So you made the decision that you wanted the sherry hogsheads for the Saneg, whereas with the Loch Gorm you prefer to use the butts. Is it purely down to the influence that it gives you in those early years, or is it also the addition of the colour it does also in those relatively young age?
It's a combination of both those things. Because we're a relatively new distillery and releasing relatively young single malts, we need something that gives it the influence early on. Now, I'm not suggesting actually that the butts don't give you quite a lovely character early on, but they tend to mature slower and therefore more long-term maturation. And the hogsheads gave us the influence we were looking for: color, character, and influence at a relatively young age, which we were looking for, and a completely different character to the Mackie Bay, which is the core expression. Are you going to tell me now?
I have great annoyance in telling you you're actually right. So congratulations. You know your own whiskey, number one. Yeah. Just a couple of things. So the Saneg is you do batches of it each year throughout the year. There's been a lot of talk recently about slightly darker Saneg, which has been available worldwide. Do you want to just quickly go into how that came about and how that happened?
And this isn't from a batch of the very rich dark color. It's a more recent batch. I think sherry casks are more difficult to work with, more difficult to get that consistency that you're looking for. And we did get a batch of hogsheads that had a huge amount of sherry influence, Oloroso sherry influence. And, in 2019, I think we put 3 releases out that were much richer and darker in color. And I think one thing that was important to me with the character on the palate remained pretty consistent, but the color was astounding. And I think it quite rightly got a number of people commenting on how the hell, what's going on here? This is a completely different whiskey. But actually on the palate, it didn't really taste a lot different, but definitely on the color and the appearance, it was definitely a very, very rich. And this was just down to the batch of casks that we got delivered in on that occasion, and explaining to people that you can't always get complete consistency unless you're adding caramel coloring or what you do when you reduce it to even lower strength than we do. And we're all about batch bottling, and though we try and get the Sanig and the Mackay very similar, it's down to the casks that we purchase and the consistency and the character of those casks. So we're now back to a less powerful color and probably a little bit more consistent with what we're looking for, and that's because we've gone through the majority of those really rich, dark sherry hogsheads, and now we're on to another batch that's giving less of that color and influence. But on the palate, they're very, very similar. It's surprising how similar they are, even though the last few batches we had a very dark, rich color.
Just a quick question that's come in. Don't forget to answer, to fire in as many questions as possible, and also keep the guesses coming. There was a couple of people that got to Sanig before you did, by the way. So they pinned their colours to the mast very quickly. One quick question about the ppm of the Sanig.
Yeah. Most of our core expressions and our limited releases are from malt that we buy from the maltings that are owned by Diageo here on Islay, and the peating specification that we buy is the 50 ppm, the higher level of peating, and so Sanig has the higher peating level. Now, I think when we talk about ppm, I think it's rather confusing and a bit of a distraction, really, because you'd never say that this was a very high, strong, peaty, sort of hit you in the forehead type of whiskey. It's soft and it's fruity. The peat's there, but it doesn't come across as particularly peaty. But actually, of all the standard bottlings on Islay, the 50 ppm is the highest here on the island, and we share that with our beg, who buy the same specification of malt from Diageo. So I know that a lot of people like to talk about ppm, but it is can be quite confusing because it all depends on the character of the whiskey that you're drinking at the time.
And there is just another question here that someone who also tuned into you with Arthur, who asked a question. Oh, that's not his question. The question is, will there ever be a run of the Sauterne cask finish again?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that worked better than the fully matured Sauterne. I just like the balance was a lot better. Just 6 months finishing in Sauterne allowed the maturation of bourbon to come through and worked much better, I believe, than the fully matured, where it was a bit full on, in my view, but then a lot of people enjoyed it. So I think you can't always be right about these things. I think we're definitely another Sauterne finish. We have a supplier of very, very good quality Sauterne casks, and we have filled more for fully matured, and I actually did a tasting, I think, on our Face Day. I tasted one of them that was 3 years old and said it wasn't really ready, and they're more difficult to work with. But the finish, Sauterne finish, yes, we'll definitely be doing another. That was very popular and worked very well.
Are you ready to put your chances against whiskey number 2 now?
Yeah, number 2. Well, you look at the colour. That isn't Mackay Bay, because I would say Mackay Bay doesn't have that sort of slightly richer colour, and it does have a slightly richer colour than Mackay Bay, because Mackay Bay is only 10% Oloroso sherry cask, and it's 4, 5, and 6 years of age, and I believe it's a bit older. It has a wonderful colour, absolutely wonderful colour, and when you nose it, it has those lovely lemon citrus notes straight away, but it starts to have more of the cask influence. So it's got a bit more age, I believe, because you can suddenly nose and you can and get some of that character from those bourbon barrels that this is mainly matured in. So you get vanilla and maybe some caramel and butterscotch starting to come through. Now, I believe that this is where we want to get Mackie Bay, because I think in time this is, to me, worked incredibly well as one of our limited releases. It's got all the influences of bourbon maturation. At 9 years of age, I believe this is, if I'm talking the right, it's just got a lovely, lovely balance, mainly bourbon influence. There's no doubt about it. The influence of the bourbon cask come through right at the front. But we have added Oloroso sherry cask to this, if I'm right. I think this is the 2010 vintage. But to me, this is where I want to get Mackie Bay in 5 or 6 years' time, because to my mind, this is how I see Kilchoman really coming to the fore with a little bit more age. The bourbon maturation, to me, to the fore, because I think bourbon maturation works incredibly well with our character of spirit, which is this light, sweet, floral character. Add a little bit of sherry influence to give it a bit more weight and depth, and you've got a great dram. And this is, I believe this is at 50 ppm. This is at the Port Ellen Malt, 50 ppm.
Oh, I think he might have frozen. We may have lost him from Isla briefly. So what I might do just now for a second is bring in James, my brother.
Hello.
Not sure what's happened to Dad there.
A fault on the tower in Beaumont.
Maybe you should have stayed on Isla a bit longer to help him out.
Yeah. No, he's doing okay though. I think he got the first 2 straight off the bat, but they were the easier of the 4, I'd say, for sure. The strength gives it away to a certain extent. I think the second half. Just so you're aware, he's had a power cut. Power cut.
Yeah. So I'm not sure he's coming back.
Okay, unlucky folks. You're down. You got the B team from here on out.
Yeah. And we know what the Drams are, sadly, as we were involved.
Well, we can pretend we can talk them through. We can talk them up, and maybe we can still run this competition. So it's still a case of first person to guess correctly. And I don't know whether we're going to allow people with question marks. Sort of almost guessing. It has to be an out and out. I think it is this.
Yeah.
From here on, we'll accept the previous ones, but from here on, it needs to be absolute confidence.
But I also think that maybe the ABV would have steered him down in the early days down the 2010 vintage being at 48%, rather than the usual 46 that the Mackie Bay, etc., would have been at. But the vintage series we first released in 2011, just to give you a bit of background. And it was our way of doing an age statement as such, as far as we did a 2006 vintage and 2011, which is a 5-year-old. And then biannually, we've been releasing them up until the 2010, which was a 9-year-old. The only difference with the vintages is the combination of casks. In the early days, it was all bourbon cask matured. And then more recently, with the 2009 and 2010, we've added some sherry casks in there as well. So especially now, tasting the 2009 and 2010, you really do get the sort of more developed Mackie Bay style that's coming through to the forefront. And the next one that will be released will be our 10-year-old, as far as a vintage series goes. But it's always one of my favorite drams, the vintage range.
I think it's, Mackie Bay has that real sort of fresh kind of vibrancy to it. Whereas,
oh
God.
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Right. Okay. I'll maybe let you and George catch up from where you left off.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we'll see you shortly, James.
Yeah, bugger off. Okay.
Are you on your phone now?
Yeah. No, I'm on my technical supervisor's phone. Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. Okay. So, have you still got the Drams with you?
Yeah. So I was going through the what I believe this is, and and I think it's a great dram. I really do, and it really showcases Kilchoman with a little bit more age. If I'm right, I think it's the 2010, and I believe this is where I want Mackie Bay to be in a few years' time, because I think it's a great dram at 9 years of age. It's the same vatting, really sort of 90% bourbon and 10% sherry, but obviously with the extra age, it just gives it a little bit more roundness, a bit more fullness, and the character from those bourbon barrels, those superb bourbon barrels we get from Buffalo Trace, is really establishing itself. Now, I think this is at 48%. It has to be at 48% if it's 2010.
It says it on the bottle.
Oh yeah, no, look, there you go, 48%. So it's definitely the 2010 vintage.
We're just, when you were briefly sort of out of action with the Power Cup, James stepped in. So we were discussing the vintage series and how this was back in 2011 when you first released the 2006 vintage. This was a way of getting an age statement as such out there. In next year, 2021, will be the next vintage that will be released, and it will be 10 years of age. I'm sure lots of people will be wondering, will you continue to keep it as the 2011 vintage, or will it be a 10-year-old? And can you try and hold your phone still?
No, is that better? That's better.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the stand now. My technical team have been working very well, working hard behind.
Excellent.
Look, I'm not sure that we're going down the age statement route yet. I understand the reasons behind it, and that people enjoy the fact that they can put an age statement on it and they know what they're buying. But I'm not a great fan of sticking an age on it particularly. I think we're more likely to carry on doing what we're doing, but explaining the age on the label and making sure everyone is appreciative of what that is. So age statements is something that we're on the back burner, but if that's something that people want us to do, then we'll look at it. We've started to release 1 or 2 limited releases with age statements on them, and we'll continue to do that a little bit. But maybe for the core range, we'll just wait and see when we get there in terms of Mackie Bay and Sele.
Very good. So bonus points here. We'll give you a chance to go through the cask. So for those of you, the 2010 vintage, as my father guessed, was a combination of bourbon and sherry. But can you remember how many bourbons and how many sherries went into it?
Into this?
Yeah.
Into the 2010? No, good God. I can't remember exactly. It was probably 12,000 bottles, I think, we released. So I'd have to look back to see what it was. But it was definitely a very similar vatting in terms of percentages of bourbon and sherry that we do for Mackie Bay, but at a much younger age. So, Mackie Bay has that vibrancy and youthful character, whereas the 2010 has a much more character from the cask it's matured in with the 9 years and a lot more roundness and softness that you expect with another 4 or 5 years of age.
Very good. So, and also what James pointed out was that we won't accept question marks as people's guesses. They have to be nailing their colours to the mast. Well, you've got two out of 2 so far, but we think we're now going to get into the realms of things slightly trickier with 2 new samples that looking at the ABV, these are cask strengths. So this is when that we probably would advise that people might have some water, but as you always say, taste it without the water and then add, if you feel it might benefit, a few drops of water. A few questions that have come in. Will there be another cognac cask again?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think that worked really well. A bit like the Calvados cask that we've also done and a few other experimental cask types. We're lucky that they seem to all work quite well. Yes, we'll definitely do more cognac. We'll definitely do, we've just filled some tequila casks, which I'm really excited about to see how those work. So we'll keep that experimental cask program going. I think it tests us at the distillery to get that right, and sometimes it's a bit tricky, but we'll certainly continue that program and try and find different cask types. Wine casks, we haven't done a lot of different wine casks yet, and we're looking to do more of those.
So would you like to put your
yes,
your nose in the next one?
Yeah, the next one is 57.2. So I presume this is a single cask. I haven't even been told that, I don't think. But I presume it's a single cask, and I presume it's bourbon. Yeah, it's bourbon. And
so what's apart from the colour of the dram, which is relatively light in colour, how have you got to that so quickly? What is the telltale sign?
On the nose, it has that sort of citrus sort of note. Very clean, very fresh. I'm erring towards our own barley for this one, but that's only just on the nose. I don't get a lot of. I tend to get a little bit more depth of character with Port Ellen malt with a 50 ppm, whereas this is quite light and fresh. You've got no prickle on the nose at 57.2. It's extraordinary, but it's lighter, it's fresher, and that's why I'm immediately going towards our own barley, which is more lightly peated.
And for those of you who aren't aware, that when he talks about our own barley, this is barley that we've grown on the farm at the distillery, that we then malted, distilled, matured, and bottled all on site, which is very, very unique. And to me, bearing in mind,
give it away now.
No, I'm not giving it away. I'm just telling people what you were when you talk about our own barley.
Well, I would say it has that wonderfully fresh character. There's not a lot of peat on the palate, the back of the palate. It's there, but it's in the background. This is a cask. 57 point gives me a slight clue on age. It could be 11, 12, or 13. I would say it's slightly younger than that. Maybe it may be 13 or 12 or 13. I think it's from our own barley, and it has this lovely fresh character, sort of farmyardy, but not, sort of fresh hay character, and it doesn't have that depth that Port Ellen malt has. I might be wrong, but that's where I'm plumping. So I'm going for 100% Islay first fill bourbon. 2000
year, go on.
2012 or 13.
Yeah, so it's 100% Islay bourbon cask from 2013.
That's what it is.
Cask 425.
God, I'm good at this, aren't I?
Well, yeah. It's nothing like self-praise. There's a few people. Well, there's someone who is very concerned that it might be their cask. Alex Haining.
Yeah, that's okay. No, well, luckily we've drunk her cask already. So thanks very much, Alex. That's great.
But a lot of people did guess the 100% Islay and go down the 100% Islay route. And personally, for me, the 100% Islay and bourbon cask is everything that's great about the distillery, and it really lets the barley come out and our spirit quality. And at 57.2, personally, I drank that without any water, and beautiful. But would you recommend people maybe adding a few drops if they're not used to drinking cask strength?
I think I think our spirit character lends it to drink it at the higher strength, but I think you're not getting it its best if you do that, because that's full of alcohol, and you're not getting all those characteristics coming through. But it's extraordinary how easy to drink that is at 57.2. But a few drops of water allows the bouquet to open up, and you can taste behind the alcohol. So I always recommend that people add a few drops. I mean, this is a staggeringly good cask, and I love this fresh character. It's a real sort of summer drink. It's full of character. It's full of sort of lightness and freshness, and you get that little bit of character, saltiness on the back of the palate. But it's very, very subtle. It's not, and it doesn't have that sort of not heavy note, but a sort of sweeter, richer character that the Port Ellen malt gives to a bourbon barrel. So I think this is fantastic. And if it's Alex's cask, that's great, because we'll carry on drinking it.
For those of you who aren't aware, Alex is a good friend of my parents, so he's not just going around drinking people's casks in the warehouse. The quick question that's come in: what's your holy grail cask? Have you found one in the warehouse recently that you've thought, "Wow, this is very special"?
I think you always come across those sorts of casks. I think we're fortunate the consistency of our casks has always been pretty good, and I'm talking about bourbon in particular because we still fill, 70% of what we fill is still bourbon, and we're very lucky to have such a good relationship with Buffalo Trace Distillery where we buy all our first fill bourbons, and they are pretty consistent. But they do throw out some different characteristics on occasions, and you do come across the odd cask. And now, to me, our 12, 10 to 14-year-old casks are really coming to the fore, and some of those are just staggeringly good. And Oloroso Sherry, 2006 and 2007, I love those as well. I've been a bourbon guy, and everybody knows that bourbon maturation is my thing. I think it works well with our character of whiskey. And yes, you come across some fantastic casks in the warehouse, and I'm fortunate to have the job I have. But I'd always plump with bourbon and sherry. I like playing around with these other cask types, but to me, they don't really do the job I'm looking for. But I know why so many people enjoy us playing, experimenting, and throwing a different light on what Kilchoman has to offer. And I think that, I always say that casks are king. Casks play such a massive part in the character of the whiskey that you drink, and it's great fun being able to put together some different releases that have a different character because they've been in different cask types.
Just a quick question here about you mentioned tequila cask that you've recently bought to fill. Do you have more information on that? Because apparently Phillip is having a fit at the moment because he wants to know more information.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got we have to be very careful about the information we give. So we got tequila and mezcal cask, okay, and the source, we know the source, but we have to be careful not to talk too much about that because they don't want us to. Tequila is something that is now allowed by the Scotch Whisky Association. I know that Diageo fills some tequila casks, and one or two other distilleries are starting to look at it. And I think it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing how it works. But we have to be very careful about the information we give out because a number of the tequila companies are not keen on it. And so it's the same is with all the cask types that we've used. I understand why they want to protect their image as a producer of a certain style of wine or spirits, and then we put our whiskey in it and we talk about the chateau or the domain that use these casks, and I understand why they don't want us to do too much of that. So we aren't allowed to talk too much about it, but we're looking forward to these maturing and seeing what happens.
No, but it's always good to see these new exciting casks and taste them as they come along. I'll just quickly fill in a couple of things. So someone asked about our own barley and the ppm of that. So with our own floor maltings and our own kiln, we are looking for a lower ppm. So we are anything from 10 to 20 parts per million with our own kiln. So it is a lot lighter in the peat, and hence the lightest, more sort of freshness to it in the glass. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to bring in James, who's been sat there patiently. He actually stepped in for you, Dad, when you went AWOL, to help with the final dram of the evening.
Okay.
Don't worry. The senior sales executive is here.
We can't hear him.
To help you out. Can you hear me?
I can hear him.
I can't. I can't.
Right. Okay. Get rid of me. I'll come back when he can hear me.
I can't hear him.
No point.
Okay. Bye, James. This is giving everyone a sort of look into the sort of life and times of the Wills family. It's a bit chaotic. So I apologise for that. Maybe he needs to turn his hearing aid up. But cask dram number four.
Number four at 59%. So
yeah,
that would tell me again that it was younger than the third dram. Younger again. So the third dram was 2013. This is a bit younger, I would suggest. It maybe not working fine with just two of you. Oh, right. Okay. That's fine. So looking at the colour, and this is the one I'm going to find the most difficult, I think, to identify. This has got maybe some sherry influence. Now, this could be an Oloroso sherry hogshead, fully matured. It could be a finish. It could be a PX. So I'm going for that, but I would say it was a bit younger. So it's probably 2014 or 15. And actually on the nose, you get a little bit of prickle, and it's not developed fully, I would say, when you nose it. So it doesn't have that real softness that you were looking for with something with a little bit more age than sort of 5 or 6 years of age. So I'm now going to taste it. Well, it's Oloroso sherry. Well, it's sherry.
Okay.
And it's got a slight richness to it, which might point me more towards PX than Oloroso, but it's PX or Oloroso, and it's quite young, and I would say it's 5 or 6 years of age, because it doesn't have that fullness that I'm looking for in something slightly older. You get much more richness and fullness and more weight, and it lacks that on the nose and on the palate. It's actually quite a nice dram, but it's still very youthful, I believe. And do you want me to carry on?
Well, I think you've sort of told us what you think it is. So you believe it's a sort of 5-6 year old PX cask.
Well, Oloroso PX. I mean, and I think the richness on the palate, or the slight richness, more rich flavour coming through would make me think more of a PX than an Oloroso. And I would plump for 2014 or 15, fully matured.
So just so people are aware, PX, Pedro Jimenez sherry, and it gives you that a lot more richness and sweetness, if I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah.
So that's why you've gone down that route.
Yeah. But I'm not sure whether it's Port Ellen or 100% our own barley. I'm not absolutely convinced I can get that. Maybe I should have a go, and I would I don't know. I'm Port Ellen, but I'm probably wrong.
Well, I've actually put someone's correct answer on the screen here for you.
Oh, it's 100% Ireland.
Yeah, so he was bang on and very quick with that response.
Yeah. Okay, so I got that wrong. 3.5 out of 4.
No, but the PX casks, they're not something that we use a huge amount of for general releases. So when you're filling a PX cask, what are you looking for that you don't get from a Oloroso hogshead, for example?
In the past, we've tended to use PX casks for finishing. So 7 or 8 year old bourbon and finish in a PX for 6 months, and that tends to work very well. We then use these PX casks to fill spirit into. So they've had a little bit of that PX influence stripped out of them, and with finishing, and then we use them for spirit. PX casks to me are great, fantastic use, but I'd rather use them as finishing or as a second fill, a refill cask, than I would as a first fill. And I'm presuming this is a first fill PX 100% Islay. And actually, it just needs few more years. I would say it just needs a little bit more time to soften out and get a little bit more full flavour and character, because it still has that slight prickle on the nose, and it still needs time to develop. But PX casks, and we buy all our sherry casks from one supplier, and Jose Miguel Martin, he produces some fantastic casks for us, mainly butts that we use, but these sherry hogsheads that we use for the Sanig, and these other cast types, the PX casks, add such a different character. And then we're doing this Fino sherry cask matured release in September, which gives a completely and utterly different character to the Oloroso and the PX cask. So we enjoy trying all these different cask types, and we fill Fino casks as well. And so actually, it's the Fino, isn't it? It's the Fino that we're doing in September, and that will give a completely different character to the Oloroso and PX. So I love playing around with all these different cask types, and we're lucky that they tend to work pretty well with our spirit character, and they tend to come together to produce a great dram.
When you're using the sherry cask, especially with our own barley, which is, so you've got less peat in the spirit, so it's slightly lighter. Have you got to be careful how long you leave them in a cask which is giving it less much flavour after 5 years? Is there a danger that you could go down the route that it's just you're losing the distillery characteristic and the cask really takes a hold?
Yeah, no, you can, and sherry cask would have that going on a lot more than bourbon. So you have to look after those casks a lot more, I think you wouldn't want to take out too many first fill sherry casks to beyond 10 years of age necessarily of our whiskies. Or if you had refills or second refills, you could take them out further. And we have a lot of whiskies in our warehouse still in first refill and second refill in different cask types, which we can take out further in terms of age profile. But I think in terms of, where does Kilchoman sit comfortably in terms of full maturation, I still believe that between 10 and 15 years is where I see the majority of Kilchoman really coming to the fore and really sort of turning heads and getting people to realize that age isn't everything in this world. And, something at 25 years of age isn't always better than something that's 15 to 18 years of age. And that's, I'm talking about established distilleries who put out releases of around 15 or 18 years, and then they do one at 25 or 30 years. And I would always plump for the younger one because I believe it's better. It's more representative of the distillery character. Everything that goes on maturing, certainly on Islay and West Coast, you're talking about something that won't have the West Coast influence and the sort of salty iodine and peaty character, because there's so much more cask influence coming through. And that cask influence will take over. And we talk about Port Ellens of 30 and 40 years of age, great drams. But would you ever pick them out in a blind tasting as being on Islay? Probably not, because they've got so much influence from the cask, and all that iodine and saltiness has been sort of drummed out of them in the cask. And they're great drams, but they don't have that character from Islay. And I think that's why people buy Islay whiskies. They enjoy that different character that comes through, and so we want to showcase that. We'll have whiskies that go through and are older, but on the whole, I would say you'll enjoy them at their best if you enjoy Kilchoman at a relatively young age, between 10 and 15 years of age.
So does this mean that you're having to, when you set up distillery in 2005, you were gearing up to release young whiskies, whereas now we're getting into the realms of releasing older whiskies? Does this mean that now the cask management is becoming far more important?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think we're fortunate now. We're refilling casks that we dump and are used for bottlings. And so we're filling more refills. And I think that will mean the age profile will be pushed out a bit. But when we started, it was all about filling the first fill cask to get all that hard-hitting character into the whiskies at a young age, so we can put them out on the market at a young age. Now we're able to play around with it a bit more, and we can put out older age statements. And this is the interesting time. I mean, we've come through a tough time, and the last 5 or 6 years, we're really enjoying what we're doing, because we can put out whiskies that people can enjoy with a little bit of age on them that they didn't have before.
Just a quick question about the barley variety for the 100% Islas that we've tasted this evening. The two single casks from 2013 and 15, the barley varieties that would have been bonus point.
that would have been Concerto, I believe. Concerto is a variety that's been well used in the industry. It's worked incredibly well, and if it works that well, you don't normally change. We do experimental barley varieties. In the last 3-4 years, we've done about 10 acres of a different variety, but Concerto is still really doing well, but it's coming to the end of its natural life, so that will be replaced fairly soon. But these will both, I would imagine, both be from Concerto.
There was a question about the amount of whiskies that we produce. that's quite a tricky question to really answer, because we have a core range of products, which is Maccabee, Saneg, Loch Gorm, and 100% Isla. And then we have limited editions that come in and around that. So really, I would say we have 4 mainstays, and then we have the limited editions that come in, much like whiskey number 2, which was the 2010 vintage. That is part of our range, but only a biannual release. One other question that's come in here is, well, this could take a while. What advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
Raise enough money before you start the bloody distillery. And we never raised enough money. Investing in whiskey distilleries in 2003-4, when I was looking for money, was not something that people were looking at. So it was really hard work trying to raise the money. We never raised enough. We got it started, took massive risk. And if I was doing it again, raise the money first, and then don't have all these sleepless nights worrying about how you're going to keep the thing going while you were trying to raise more money. Nowadays, distilleries are starting up all over the world, and now it's something that is an investment opportunity that people now look at. So, it was tough. It was very tough. And I think actually, looking back, I'm glad that we had all those tough times, because you enjoy all the good times a lot better if you've come through the really tough times that we had in the first 4 or 5 years.
Just a quick one. People have been asking about the cask type. So just to go through what the drams were. So number 1 was Saneg, which he sadly got correct. Number 2 was the 2010 vintage, which also he got correct. Number 3 was the 100% Isla, bourbon cask number 425 from 2013. And number 4 was 100% Isla, PX Hogshead cask 319 from 2015. So you didn't disgrace yourself. You did well there. You must be pleased that you're getting praise.
Well, I think I'd look a bit of a chump if I didn't get, two of the regular releases, or certainly, I'd feel pretty disappointed if I couldn't get those right. The other 2, could have gone either way, but I think the bourbon, the 100% Isla, the Kilchoman barley is so distinctive. That stood out to me. And then the PX, well, I knew it was younger, but I wasn't sure it was our own barley. But they're all great drams, and it's fun to do this. And I'm sure a lot of people have got these right. I'm sure they have, and probably got 4 out of 4.
Yeah, I mean, you got a bit more praise here. The old boy has great knowledge of casks. I think they're referring to you there. So I think we're gonna wrap it up for this evening. Just a couple of things to add. We have got another tasting pack which is going on sale this evening. That will be for a tasting on the 9th of July. So pop online to purchase one of those. Those of you who guessed correctly, Catherine, who is my dad's technical advisor, who's been lurking in the background, will have been taking a note of the people that got those right, and we'll be in touch as far as getting those in. Probably the best thing to do is if you send a message to the distillery on either Facebook or Instagram or whatever, we'll send you a message, and then we'll get those prizes out to you. But thank you very much for tuning in, even though we had minor technical issues, which was quite interesting. It's the first time for everything. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again on the 9th. And if there's any questions you haven't had asked, do of course send them directly to the distillery, and we will answer all those questions. So enjoy your evening, and thank you very much for tuning in.
Yeah, so thanks very much for everyone for tuning in, and see you again soon.
Bye, Dad.
Bye-bye.